I want to ask you a question. Do you remember when you received the talk from your parents?
The first time was the buddy conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like the older boy in the neighborhood.
How different was what your mom told you than from what your buddy told you? This is awesome. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Catholic Dads podcast.
Hey,
Thanks
Jeff,
for checking
how are
in.
you?
I'm great. So we've got all this great new equipment in the studio. We've actually got like a real life soundboard. We've got real cool fuzzy plate mics, and I have no idea what that does for you, but
That's the pop filter.
is that what that does?
So if I go pop, 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 it
doesn't-
shouldn't pop.
Well, we'll find out.
When you do your P's
Right.
and
But are they still universal mics or are they directional?
no, they're omni or no, they're they're only supposed to pick up what's in front of you, whatever that means.
Yeah, right. So like if you talk into the fuzzy plate, it's only picking up the sound that's kind of coming through the fuzzy plate.
Yes.
Ideally.
Yes.
All right. Well, so the sound quality has been much improved. Hopefully everybody's enjoying that. So thanks a lot to Chad for doing that and setting that all up. And I'm watching the GarageBand on the monitor, and the 2 tracks of lots of squiggly lines have turned into 1 track of no squiggly lines. So
Yeah,
I think it'll be
because
okay.
there's one. It's just one. There's 2 mics going into the board, and then that board goes to GarageBand. So it's only 1 input on GarageBand,
Yeah.
and that's why we only have 1. But I think it's good. The last episode was the first episode that we had with the new setup. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the sound upgrades.
Yeah.
But we are going to continue our topic of following Humanae Vitae. So Humanae Vitae does turn 50 years old this month on the 25th. And this one should be scheduled to come out on the 20th, I guess, right? Because the last episode is releasing in real time today.
Right.
And then so this one will come out next week. So that's going to be July 20th. And I'm trying to schedule everything to come out like for a commute. So, our target audience is definitely dads. I mean, anybody really, but we're speaking mainly to dads. And, if dads are going to work at, 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever in the morning, I'm trying to get them scheduled to be released and available so folks can be listening on their commute to work.
That's awesome.
Because I think that's a good use of your time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Have we had that as a topic? What to do with your downtime? I think we've talked about putting faith into areas and using your car ride home and that sort of thing, but
not specific.
Not
I don't
specific.
think.
Anyway,
Because that's a good. I mean, for me at least, I'm traveling an hour each way.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time.
That's
and
amazing.
right now, all I do is listen to podcasts.
yeah, that's awesome.
And I think that's a good use of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's amazing we have these the technology to do that. Where even a couple years ago it would have been either news talk or sports talk or and then that's just an hour of not a whole lot of personal growth and development, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So we're going to continue with Humanae Vitae. So we've already talked about NFP, and then last week we talked about the problem with porn. And today I want to turn to the birds and the bees. So like the conversation that we all have with our kids, and letting them know about the facts of life, or all those funny words that we over the years come up with.
Right.
With
And maybe we can, just thinking about it, maybe because there's going to be a lot of Catholic dads out there that have got the small kids and the middle kids and that sort of thing, and that's kind of where you've got your kids you've got a couple older than us and that sort of thing. So not just the birds and the bees, but maybe also just the topic of how do you approach the entire realm of human sexuality within your kids and within the family. So how do you talk about that? How do you approach just the kind of a theology of the body kind of discussion as well? Because the bird and the bees, that conversation shouldn't come out of nowhere, and it shouldn't be a complete surprise.
Yes.
Within a very holy context, very early on, we should have an appreciation for our bodies. We should recognize the difference between boys and girls, and then that should lead into a conversation that doesn't,
Yeah.
it'll be always difficult and shocking and embarrassing,
It's
right?
always going to be an awkward conversation.
But at least you've set some of the foundation. So, and I've talked about that a bit before in terms of the whole, purity and how do you approach that with, especially girls and daughters and, starting that early in terms of, this is an appropriate thing to wear because we need to be, modest. And why do we need to be modest? Because we need to, protect, we need to honor our bodies. They were created by God for a purpose, and that sort of thing. And you can start those conversations very early, right?
Yes.
So maybe we can broaden it just a little bit.
No, for sure. I'm wanting to just recognize the fact, and again, part of the reasons why I feel we're doing this podcast is to just help people that may not have been, through the experiences that we've gained through, the children that we've had, bringing up these kids for, 18 years. I've been a dad for 18 years. So just to kind of, I'm not even call it wisdom. I'm just going to call it experience. It's
I'd call it mistakes, but you can call it whatever you want.
So so y'all can learn from our mistakes and hopefully make it smoother for you and your family at whatever it is that we're talking about. So today we're going to be talking about that awkward conversation, and yes, it's going to always be awkward no matter how you frame it. To talk about this with your kids. So I want to ask you a question, and that is, do you remember when you received the talk from your parents?
So leading up to this podcast and thinking about it, there's actually two very clear memories in my mind. And this goes to a bit of the topic as well. There's two times that I remember as a kid growing up that I was told. The first time was the buddy conversation, right? Yeah. Like the older boy in the neighborhood and all that. And then the other conversation was, with my mom and,
okay. And just real quick. So what's the time difference between when buddy told you and when mom told you?
Oh, that's a tough question. I'm not sure.
I mean, is it years?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe.
So when buddy told you, how old were you think?
Probably middle school for both. Maybe late elementary school. So it might be like a year or two in between or whatever. But maybe not even that. Maybe a year or two. So it seems like it would be like kind of later elementary school, and then probably sometime in middle school, maybe 5th grade, 6th grade, kind of that time frame.
Okay. Do you think your mom? Do you think in that, or do you recall if maybe it was a conversation you were having with your mom and say, "Oh yeah, my buddy told me this," and then she had to say, "Well, this is it," or do you remember that?
No, it was the context was more like, I'm pretty sure you already know this, but let's just make sure that you understand, and if you have any questions about it, you can come to us, and that's the right people to talk to. And so I don't know, maybe there was background, maybe the moms were talking that one kid gets chicken pox and everybody in the neighborhood comes over to play, so they all get it. Maybe it was something like, well, I told my kids, so you might have to talk to your kid about it. I don't know. But it was pretty short, and I think I don't remember being super embarrassed because it was kind of already new, and I remember she was, some of these movies that we've seen, have you talked about, what's going on? Like, but that was pretty much straightforward, and it was pretty much over.
How different was what your mom told you than from what your buddy told you?
So I remember them. I don't remember a difference, to be honest. It was mostly like the mechanics. You know what I mean? It's like, not to go into any specifics, but I don't think it was any. I don't remember being any different. It was just it was like a biological conversation. Yeah.
And I think that's really why I wanted to start with this is that, number one, somebody's going to tell your kids,
right,
about the facts of life. You don't know where they're going to be coming from,
right,
and it might be the totally true facts of life.
Yep.
For me, the conversations that we had, and it was in middle school. So in middle school, something's happening with the biology of our body, with our bodies, with hormones and whatnot. Everybody's starting through puberty and all of this.
Yep.
So that's about the time where I think it's natural that kids, I guess boys and girls, I can't speak from a girl's perspective, but boys and girls, I think, are like recognizing something's up.
Yep.
And then naturally they're starting to talk,
right.
So I went to a public school growing up, And I also heard about, the birds and the bees in middle school, but it was not anything,
Right.
I'm talking anything remotely correct.
Right.
Okay? Like not even remotely correct.
Nice.
And I will be, just to have full disclosure, I never got the talk.
Yeah.
Never.
Yep. That's
And
interesting.
until the day I was moving out to go to live in the fraternity house.
Uh-huh.
And that's whenever my mom came up to my room and she was going to tell me about the birds and the bees, which, of course,
Like a
by
decade
then,
too late.
I had already,
Yeah.
I already quote unquote know.
Yep.
But guess what, y'all? I didn't know. Mm-hmm. Because what you think you know about the mechanics, like you just
Right.
put it, is only a small piece
Right.
of what it is to have, this body that God gave us and its purpose.
Right.
And that's really the avenue that I want to go down today is like
Right.
there's a difference between saying this is a boy's
Yep.
body and this is a girl's body and this is what happens when
Yep.
two of them come together and all of that and get the mechanics out of the way and be done. That's really not the way that you should be approaching this.
Yeah, and that's why starting with the, there's age appropriate things that you can start
Yeah.
very early.
Yes.
That leads into that conversation about purity, about
Right.
modesty, about the purpose of why we're here. And so I went. Theology of the body, of course, is an incredible gift that we've been given as Catholics, and something that I believe is a huge answer to a lot of the questions that the world is asking. And going back to the Chris Pratt podcast, I'm waiting and praying. It's not me. For someone that's got the clarity about that can bring it to the level of the culture right now, because the culture needs to hear this.
Yeah.
And it's an answer to so much of the abuse and the use and
Yeah.
we were out to dinner last night and there was a lady that had some shirt about, the patriarchy isn't going to smash itself and all this, like, all of that is coming out of this like really wrong view of what, the human sexuality is. And that's what Theology of the Body answers. And it answers it from the standpoint of you have a body and it's a reflection of who you are, how you use it, and how other people view you as a body. All of those things are really important. So I think that's a great. I'm glad you're going in that direction, because I think that's huge. And I think presenting it to our kids that way, because again, we've had those conversations where it's like, do not do this.
Yes.
Well, why not? Why should I wait for marriage? None of my friends are. Right? Why should I do this? None of my friends are. Why shouldn't I? Then you start the conversations early enough that then you can put the talk into context, right? And it has to be in context. It can't just be a biology lesson and then you drop in, and drop back out. Land that bird and then see I worked it in, and then get back out. No, you're absolutely right. Put it in the context, and that's a great topic.
Yeah. So I won't so theology of the body is like a huge topic.
Oh yeah.
So this won't cover all of theology of the body, but what I'll try to do is put the talk, the birds and the bees, the facts of life, in the context of like what I feel is the core of theology of the body. Perfect. About what love is, and then we can kind of riff on that between me and you, and we can just see where it goes. But the core of theology of the body is that love is free, total, faithful, and fruitful. So when you give yourself, why do I have to wait until? And so Jeff just talked about it, and we talked about it in probably the last two podcasts. It's like you can't just tell people not to do something. You gotta tell the why of why are we going to do these things. So it's like, why am I going to save myself for marriage? This is whenever you say, okay, love is. What is love? Mm-hmm. And every time I hear what is love, I think of that.
Yeah,
song,
I just heard it in my head. Yeah, I just heard it in my song. With your awesome
I would love
mics.
to cue that up, but what is love, Jeff?
Yeah, and that's the answer, I think, that is inherent in the theology of the body that the society needs, because love is never use, and right now across every area of society, use is rampant. And it always has been. It's part of the human experience because we're fallen, and this isn't new to our generation.
Right.
It's always been there. But the answer to the use that people are seeing is the theology of the body, and love never uses. Right. Love is always looking for the better for the other.
Exactly.
And it's always looking to the other. And there's some really, just beautiful, of course, ways that the thinkers, Christopher West and the guys that are out there that are really digging into this. And then, of course, John Paul II's, all of his, it's just the beautiful way that it's communicated is the answer to this. And if you started the conversation with, we're going to talk about love today and what true love is, right? And how to truly treat, if you're talking to the boys, because that's our experience, right? How to truly treat, the women in your life, whether it's mom, sister, girlfriend, wife, that love always starts with, giving, looking for the other, looking for the better of the other. And that can be expressed in so many different ways. And this is one way that the marriage couple gets to express it, which is unique to the marriage couple. And that's why, we wait. And then you can start that conversation.
Willing the good of the other. Absolutely. So, and the reason why I wanted to just start it with the love thing is because that might be one of the objections that you get from a young person whenever you're saying, this is, to save yourself for marriage and all that. They might, but Dad, I love her, or I love him.
Right.
We're in love.
Right.
So what is love? Okay, so love is willing the good of the other, and okay, they might, by that definition, they might say, but I do will the good of him or her. So in Theology of the Body, Pope John Paul II talks about, Saint Pope John Paul II. Is that how you would say it?
Yep, I think so.
Saint
Paul the Great, I think.
Saint John Paul the Great.
Yeah.
He says that love is freely, total, faithful, fruitful.
Yep.
So you give yourself freely. In other words, you're not forced into any of the stuff that you're going to do.
Right.
Any of the acts that you're going to perform of expression of love should not be done out of a spirit of servitude. I have to do it.
Right.
This person is, forcing me to do it. You're freely giving yourself to the other person. And then you're totally giving yourself. And that's really where a lot of the, if I'm giving you a part of me, which is the pleasurable part of the sexual act, but I'm withholding the all the other parts that come with it, either by contraception or otherwise, that's not a total self-gift.
Right.
That is a partial self-gift.
Well, so that definitely tracks into the NFP conversation.
Yep.
I think that's a key point for the generation that can be talked about, because the phrase that I'm reading through the book just to get ready for this, and I didn't go as far as long as I want to. I've read some stuff before and listened to a lot of speeches and stuff. One of the things that, and I don't think it's John Paul the Great that said this because it's a little crass, but otherwise you break it down and it just becomes an indoor recreation. Yeah. Right? If you don't recognize this totality of it, which is, this, of all of the ways that humans interact, this is such a total, intimate is the right word, and that gets thrown around a lot, but that's really the definition of it, is it should be between two people and it's totally given. So if this is a first date, if this is the hookup culture, talked about that before, that's not total at all, because everyone is holding something back. In fact, it's the opposite. You're holding everything back from somebody in a hookup culture, because the whole definition of it is that I'm trying not to make a connection with you. And that's a big push. That's a way that you can attack that conversation, right? If you're out there dating, that's great. We need to, you need to be out there. You need to date. You need to meet lots of people. Yeah. But not that. Yeah. Right. That's a total gift of yourself, and you can only really give that kind of once. Yeah. Right. Because if by the definition of total, it's
you're total. All in.
That's it.
I don't have anything else. I'm not reserving anything else. That's a great insight. Yeah. So then that leads into the faithful. Yep. So the next part is faithful, and faithful love is obviously, it's like you're just
exclusive.
Saying, it's exclusive.
Right.
One and one. That's it. There's no others. Mm-hmm. And then fruitful. So whatever the union of those two bodies when they come together is potentially fruitful, and we don't want to circumvent that by any other means, and let basically leaving it up to God to do that. So if you're a child, if you're a teenager, you're incapable of doing that.
Right.
You really are. I mean, I know that the times are different than it was before. I know that we probably have somebody in maybe our grandparents or great grandparents' generation that may have gotten married at 18 or maybe even younger. Yep. Those, let's not kid ourselves. Those days are gone. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's impossible for it to happen. I mean, I do know that there are some very young loves out there that got married, and that's fantastic. But I would say that the majority are
Right.
probably not really at that spot.
Yeah.
But when you're young, especially as a father of boys, the way that I have to approach the subject of when you're talking about the facts of life, we need to come up with a better name for this. The birds and the bees, I hate that. The facts of life, I hate that. We've always just referred to it as the talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We need to come up with a better. Be thinking about that.
Sure.
But just coming at it from for you to have all of this. So now that you know that love is really it needs to be freely, totally, faithfully, fruitfully given to the other. So that now means that. Are you prepared for that right now? Mm-hmm. And the answer is no. And so I guess I could really, at this point, kind of insert, for our boys, about 6th grade is when we approach the talk with them.
Yep.
Again, like we talked about in the beginning, your body's starting to go through changes.
Yep.
We do homeschool, so we have less of a risk, if you want to call it a risk, of them hearing it from their friends. But they still have friends, they still go around and they hang out and they talk, and you're not there 100% of the time, so you never know what they're talking about. So about 6th grade, so early middle school is when we're going there. So obviously in early middle school, they're certainly not prepared to have a job and to go out and work hard to bring home their pay so they can support their wives that they have, right? But again, you're framing it in the fashion of, look, this is how God has intended this. Now, I didn't have Theology of the Body to back me up for whenever I had the talk with Evan.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I think we did have it for whenever the talk came up for Elliot and for Drew. Mm-hmm. And they do. Evan and Elliot do listen to the podcast, so I'm not going to embarrass them on this podcast. But it's just important that you're framing it again from the frame of, you've got to have these conditions met freely, totally, faithfully, fruitfully. Right. And at the moment, you're just not ready for it. Right. But then you do have to get into an awkward conversation of the mechanics of things, and that does get awkward. Yeah. So I'll just go into like maybe some tips and tricks. So Jeff already mentioned that it shouldn't be like sprung on them. Mm-hmm. I got to admit that I did spring it on 2. So you can guess. I mean, of which ones those were, but it was that it's time. You feel that it's time. Don't just. I feel that it worked better in this particular way that I was just going to say is, don't just like walk up to their room and be like, so, this and that. Right. But at the same time, anytime my kids would get in the car with me and it was just one-on-one and they're about that age. Yep. Let's just say that they're in danger of getting the talk. Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's like you're driving and they don't really realize that you're not really going anywhere. Nice. and then you just start, having the slow entry into the conversation, and then while you're just driving around town, you're just having this conversation. But anyway, having it with the background of coming from the love part, I think great. Is very important, because that's something that I never got for sure. Right. Again, when I first heard about it from middle school, from my friends, it was number one, completely wrong on the mechanics. Yeah. and then I learned, quote unquote, learned about these things from the totally wrong, sources. When you learn your facts of life from pornography, to be honest, that's sad. Yep. And that's the damage that could be caused to our future generations. I know what it did to me. Yeah. And it's sad, y'all. So that's why I think it was important to talk about these 3 topics in succession, because they really have to do with each other: natural family planning, pornography, birds and bees. The talk. It could be, those things could be very challenging, but we can't put our heads in the sand and say that, they'll learn it. They'll find out about it. Well, guys, they're going to find out about it from the absolute wrong sources. Yeah. So, I just encourage everybody to take it in, take it upon yourself to be the man, to go in, together with your wife, and y'all have a conversation about how best to approach it. But you want them to hear it from you, and you want them to have a good view and a true view of what this is all about.
No, and you've totally inspired me as part of this podcast to make sure that I step up a little bit and put the proper context. If I'd ever really sat down and given it some serious thought, maybe I would have been wise enough to come up with that, but I'm learning from your experience already, which is great. And that's just kind of the final thought too, running through my head is, Catholic dads, it's never an easy conversation. We all have that funny story, and I'm glad you asked that in the beginning of the podcast. Think back as to how you learned, who told you, how you told, or how you were told, and then don't follow that pattern. If it was a negative experience, don't follow that pattern for your kids. Go search out the resources. If it's an uncomfortable conversation, do what you can, learn what you can before the conversation needs to happen, so that you're as much ready for it as possible. You'll never really be ready for it, but buttress that and use the theology of the body, use all this stuff that you can do, but don't not do that. Right?
Yes.
There's all these sort of only times that we get in our lives. You're only going to get married once. Typically, right? To think about for the sake of the argument, right?
Yes.
You're only going to have your first kiss once. You're only going to have your first baby once. You're only going to have your first, and you're only going to tell your kid, you're only going to have one chance to have this conversation and do it well.
Yeah.
So prepare yourself. Don't renege on our responsibility.
Yeah.
And remember that the culture and the world is going to tell your kid something else.
Yeah.
And so if we don't do it the way that needs to be done, then the culture will. And
exactly right.
Even if on the first swing, you didn't hit
you might have a foul tip,
home run. The nice thing too about starting, middle school, I think is the appropriate. We had sex ed in middle school in the public schools, and that was very biologically based. The nice thing about starting early, leading up to the talk, and then the talk isn't like a one-time thing. And I know you taught theology of the body for the apologetics group, which is fantastic. Yeah. You have to continue having those conversations, because as they get older, right, from 12 to 18 is like two different people, obviously.
Yeah.
So, is the children mature, as their experiences mature, as boyfriends and girlfriends start, coming onto the scene, those conversations need to be continual, and they need to be different, and they need to be kind of open, so that you can prevent that. And the first time might be awkward. The fifth time might be awkward, but by the 8th or 10th time, if you've created this open channel, then, it can be really, really helpful for your kids, right? Yeah. And that's what we're called to do.
Yeah. And I would just say, let me adjust that. I would just say that, so I taught theology of the body for teens. There's a great book series and DVD series that's out. Ascension Press is who puts it out. It's fantastic. It's a very good resource. So to your point, use that if you wanted to have that. But that's theology of the body for teens. And I would, whenever we taught that, believe we offered it for anybody 9th and 10th grade was in our group, or maybe even was just as long as you were 9th grade and above, you could do it. But there was nobody that was really older than our boys who were going through it, they were either 9th or 10th. We did put a stipulation that you had to have had the talk already. This is not going to be the talk. You're gonna come in with understanding that we're gonna be talking about these things, and we have to have a baseline of knowledge. Yeah. There is a theology of the body for middle schoolers, which I'm not familiar with, and I'm not sure if that goes more of like what we're talking about here, where it's like working theology of the body into the talk that you're having with your kids. Right. I'd have to look at that. Yeah. We didn't do that. They were doing it for the girls group. They did it at the for the middle schoolers. But so again, just encouraging you all to step up. Let's take our fatherly duty seriously. Let's take this upon ourselves and bring our kids to the right view. Don't try to scare them into things like to say you can get a disease. And I mean, obviously they need to know about these things. So, I mean, these are important things to talk about when you're having the talk, but don't make that be the basis, because if you make the basis, you're going to get a disease, or you're going to get her pregnant, or, all of these things. Well, it's like, oh, well, condoms prevent that. And I mean, so there could be arguments against all of that. But when you come at it from the angle of love, that's really the true way. And I think that's going to inspire our kids to do great things.
Great podcast, Chad. Good job.
Awesome. Everybody out there, we're very thankful that you're staying with us, that you're giving us some good feedback, and we really and truly appreciate it. We had some good news this past week, I guess it was, that we will be joining the Breadbox Media group of Catholic podcasts. So we're super excited about that. Not sure how much longer we'll be on this feed, but we'll give everybody some heads up with respect to what the new feed will be. That'll be on the website, or I'm sorry, on our Facebook page. We'll post it on the Facebook page.
So what'll happen is, if you're subscribed to the podcast in iTunes or Overcast or whatever you listen to us in, that subscription, you'll just have to find the new Catholic Dads podcast and just resubscribe.
That's right.
Breadbox Media is a great Catholic media consortium. They've reached out to us, and we're very, very grateful that they've done that, and it's quite an honor. And we'll just continue to be able to create content on the podcast, but it's basically just a new link. So once you do that, flip over, and as it gets closer, we'll keep reminding everybody and let you know what it's going to be. It'll just be a simple, just search us in your iTunes store and bring us back down, and after that, it should be seamless.
Yeah, and all the past podcasts will be eventually uploaded, so it'll all be there. So regardless of where you find us, go ahead and find us. I say that the Facebook page is still the best, kind of home base for us, and you can go find all of our podcasts on iTunes at the moment. Still can't stress enough that the algorithm for Facebook and the algorithm for iTunes, it's predicated on how many likes and subscribes that you get. And I hate saying that, because it's almost like a parody now on YouTube, like and subscribe. But that's the truth. That's how people are able to see us and maybe hear the message. So if you feel that this is something that's benefited you, we would really appreciate some comments. Number one, just to have feedback from what we're doing here. What could we do better? But also so that the algorithm will see this, see more people liking it and getting into it. So it'll say, hey, let's float this one to the top so other people can see it. And
just really quick, prayer requests for all of you guys out there. I got some bad news about my grandmother last night. She had a pretty bad fall, and so the family's kind of gathering around to see where this will go. So your prayers are much appreciated. She's 93 years old. She's 2 weeks away, she's 2 weeks away from her 93rd birthday. So a beautiful, beautiful soul, an incredible woman, a member of the greatest generation in every stereotype the greatest generation holds. And so, your prayers would be much appreciated for her recovery and her comfort, because unfortunately it's difficult for her to find comfort right now.
Okay, absolutely. We'll pray for you, brother.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great day, and St. Joseph,
pray for us.